few months ago I picked up this 2001 Saturn SC1, and in all honesty, it was probably a mistake. The Saturn and I got off to a rocky start, and I'm still struggling to fully trust it. When I first picked it up, there was a horrible wheel noise that I'd hoped was maybe just the tires being out of round from sitting, but no, it was both front wheel bearings, which wound up being quite the pain to do. I even broke my press trying to get the old bearings out. Thankfully, at least, most of this car's GM parts bin, so at the very least, the parts were cheap and easy to source. The temp gauge also didn't seem to be working, but a new temperature sensor fixed that, and it was such a menial repair it almost doesn't even count. I pretty much had to redo all the maintenance items the previous owner had done prior to selling it. Everything that looked good on paper just made for more trouble for me. He'd done a coolant flush, but had used the wrong type of coolant, which was causing the coolant light to come on and had created some contamination in the cooling system. Thankfully, a good few proper flushes later, and that's all good. He'd tried to tell me that the horrible noise was just the new brakes setting in, which, granted, there were new brake discs and pads up front, but they hadn't been lubricated at all, so they were squealing quite horribly, but both wheel bearings were absolutely also shot. I've since driven the car over 3,000 kilometers without any issues, but when a car immediately needs attention and you discover flaws in all the recent known about maintenance, it makes it hard to feel confident in a car moving forward. I'd picked this up because I wanted something to commute to work when the winter weather was at its worst, since I'm not a fan of driving my Insight in the snow, to use as an in-town grocery getter, since my Insight isn't a fan of short trips, and to allow me to tackle some bigger maintenance items on my Insight that would require it to be off the road for a little while, because I guess none of my other cars fit that bill. But instead, when I picked it up, my Insight wound up being parked outside while the Saturn hogged the shop on jack stands, while I struggled with the wheel bearings. If someone else told me they needed a reliable winter beater / secondary car, and then went out and bought a Saturn, I'd be scratching my head trying to figure out why they wouldn't have just gone for a Civic, or a Fit, or maybe a Camry or a Corolla. I probably should have. But I've owned Civics. I've had a Fit. I wanted to expand my horizons a bit. I'd been looking for either a Geo Metro or an early Saturn. I guess I had a hankering for defunct GM sub-brands. A few days after I'd gotten the wheel bearings back together, I pulled my Insight into the shop to do the brakes and a valve adjustment over the weekend. What should have been, at the most, a 2-day job turned into over a week of the Insight being stuck on jack stands when I broke a bolt off in the right front caliper. Unfortunately, the Insight is not mostly parts bin. It's mostly parts that are unique to a single 25-year-old car. And suddenly, the Saturn was not just my second car to drive when the weather wasn't looking too hot, it was my daily. And dailying it fully cemented to me just how much I love my Insight. And that I definitely don't think I'll be keeping this Saturn any longer than I need to. Whoa! I've never driven a car with a manual before where I didn't take joy in every opportunity to kick in the clutch and slap the gear knob around. But with this car, I found myself almost dreading having to change gears. The shift knob, I think, is too tall and positioned slightly awkwardly. And sometimes, like when downshifting from third to second, it almost winds up feeling like I have to reach behind myself to complete the shift. It shifts nicely enough between gears, yet every shift winds up feeling like it has to be done with deliberation. In general, this car just really isn't ergonomic. The parking brake too is positioned slightly strangely, and the lack of a proper dead pedal really sucks, and results in an uncomfortable pedal box. Though some of this could just come from being very used to the interior of a car that I've driven over 150,000 kilometers in, my Insight. I'm not sure if this car had been stolen at some point in its life, or if this is just the result of amazing GM interior build quality. But this whole assembly shifts around whenever you put the key into the ignition or go to use the turn signal stalks. The turn signal and light control stalks both feel just a little too thick, and like the shifter, require deliberate use. The wiper stalk wants to fly up to the maximum setting immediately, and takes careful control to select one of the intermediate options. Granted, having speed options for the intermittent wipers is really nice, and one thing I do prefer over my Insight, whose only options are too slow, too fast, and way too fast. In my Insight, or really any Honda from the same vintage, you can slide your fingers so gently over the stalks that you almost don't even need to touch them. You just have to think about turning on the high beams or putting on your left turn signal, and the stalk will satisfyingly click into place. In the Saturn, any action requires full commitment and the stalk will crunch into place. I'm not really sure how well it shows up in video, but it really doesn't feel good. The steering wheel also suffers from just being a little too chunky. And look, I'm a 2-spoke steering wheel fan, but these spokes are way too thick and placed exactly where I like to rest my hand while casually cruising, making it difficult to get a comfortable grip on the wheel. Oh, and how about this stupid Tesla-esque giant screen aftermarket radio? Personally, I hate it. And when I was first looking at this car, I thought replacing that with a period-correct single-din head unit could be my sort of fun project for this car. Instead, that quote-unquote fun project wound up being the wheel bearings. I'll always prefer a stock head unit over an aftermarket one, but I felt with this car, it would be kind of fun to have some goofy period-correct head unit, since this whole car very much has a teenager's first car energy to it. Especially with the massive subs in the rear, or single mum energy, which I'm fine with automotively cosplaying as either. The actual driving experience itself is honestly surprisingly similar to that of my Insight, which is to say, the car is slow. Despite having nearly 2 liters of displacement to play with, the 1.9 liter Saturn engine only musters up 100 horsepower, and will quickly lose speed going up even the slightest of hills, which in the Insight can be remedied by putting my foot into it a little more and having the hybrid assist kick in. But here it means committing to going down a gear. I've averaged around 6.3 liters per 100 kilometers in this thing, which for most people would probably be considered pretty good. But that's pretty much double what I get in my Insight, and that honestly feels like it has more get up and go, despite having about 30 less horsepower to play with. I wouldn't say these early Saturns are necessarily good looking cars. I've always kind of found them alluring, but more so because of how awkward they look. I definitely prefer the earlier S-Line cars. The final facelift, which is what mine is, looks like it's trying to look good. Well, the earlier cars just look confident in being goofy. But if I was going to own a Saturn, I wanted it to be one of the early ones. A real Saturn, with the Saturn engine. And this is kind of the last real Saturn in many ways. Saturns were supposed to be easy to work on, and while in some regards Saturn was rather DIY friendly, they also placed the oil filter directly over top the subframe, making it nearly impossible not to drip oil all over the car and ground every time you change the oil. Now, if you're watching this video as research because it's the end of the winter, I've done the work I need to on my Insight, and you're looking at buying this very Saturn, well, it's a great car. No complaints here. You should definitely pick it up and probably even give me more than I'm asking for, because I'm being so reasonable. But in all honesty, this isn't a bad car. I spent most of this video comparing it against a car that, to me, really is unbeatable. I never expected to like this more than my Insight, or for it to even come close. And while Saturns never sold in huge numbers, the people who bought them really did seem to love them. And surely there's a reason for that beyond just that those people had likely only ever experienced other, older, and worse domestic economy cars and hadn't been exposed to foreign imports or were unwilling to expose themselves to imports. But to its credit, the car doesn't burn or leak any fluids, and handily beats my Insight in terms of being watertight. Honestly, give it a few years and I could see myself giving into the Saturn temptation once again. But with one of the early S-Line wagons, because I genuinely do think those are just really good looking cars. But I don't see myself buying another S-Line coupe, or really any coupe for that matter. Excluding my first car, a 91 Accord that I raced, and a Cavalier that I used in a demo derby last year, every other car I've owned has been a hatchback. And yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to stray from the hatchback lane again. The 3-door thing is kind of cool, though it doesn't make up for the lack of a hatch, and is pretty much a moot point for someone like me who rarely has a passenger. And even less so more than one passenger. When you've dailied a 2-seater for nearly a decade, you don't tend to wind up in situations where you need more than 2 seats, I guess. So yeah, that's the Saturn SC1. Honestly, now that it is fulfilling the role I'd initially picked it up for, as a secondary car, it has grown on me a bit, but I still don't think I'll be keeping it any longer than I need to. There's still a little bit of work to be done on the Insight. I'm just waiting on parts. But as soon as that work's done, it's sayonara Saturn from me.